I had an interesting conversation with a friend right before the 2020 election. I knew that she had a conservative viewpoint, and I asked her some of the reasons she was considering voting for Donald Trump in the next election. One of her responses was school choice. To be honest, I had no idea what she meant, and on the surface, it sounded like a reasonable policy, which was uncommon for Donald Trump, and therefore left me suspicious. Jokes aside, I was curious to learn more. I went home that night and did some of my own research. You see, I grew up in a town where my parents could afford for me to pay, could afford the property taxes to pay for me to send me to a blue ribbon school. This was in lieu of my parents sending me to a private school if they had ended up buying a house in a district where the schools were not known to be as good. I was afforded that privilege based on my parents' socioeconomic status. Today, I'm going to discuss the school choice debate. There are several choices. Um, there are several types of choice I'm referring to: school vouchers, magnet, charter. My focus here today will be on charter schools. I hope to enlighten everyone on how charter schools factor into the school choice debate using a sociocultural analysis in order to understand the impact of charter schools have on the most vulnerable communities. So, what do they mean by school choice? Whose choice? And why do we need more choice? The choice being referred to is quite literal. It's the choice for parents to decide where their child attends school, regardless of where they live. Currently, public schools are assigned to students based on the zip code in which where that student lives. It it is a fact that people of greater economic means already have school choice because they can afford to move to areas with high quality public schools and enroll their kids in private schools, thus creating a privilege, as stated earlier, that is afforded to those who have access to wealth. Proponents of school choice often explain that charter schools are the solution to this inequity of choice. What is a charter school? Why are they advocated for, and why are they criticized? Charter schools are publicly funded like public schools and paid for by tax dollars like public schools, but they're independently run by organizations rather than school districts. Similarly to public schools, charter schools are open to all students and are not decided by test scores or entrance interviews or exams. However, many popular charter schools that are in high demand will decide students based on a lottery system as to give as much equal access as possible. Charter schools essentially privatize public schooling. There have been cases made for the privatization of schooling, like choice for parents. It has been argued that the competition for state and local tax dollars will drive schools to improve. Like, if they're competing, maybe they'll do better. However, I feel there's a much stronger case to be made for why the illusion of school choice ends up harming low-income communities more than it ends up helping them, as they are stated to do. For starters, the best example of why charter schools are harmful goes as follows. Imagine a school district with 10 schools. Each will have 100 students. A new charter opens in a school district and attracts 100 students itself, 10 students from each of the existing schools. Each district now has less money that would have originally been allocated to them, since the schools receive money for each child enrolled, and each is serving just 90 now. That leads to budgets being cut, and that can look like loss in teachers, and a lot of times the principal's salary may be cut, or the building's maintenance may be cut, and they might even cut sports programs or increase class sizes to make up for that loss, therefore serving their students to a lesser degree than they were before in the already difficult circumstances that they were under. It should be acknowledged that there is validity to the claim that American public schools are not serving low-income communities well. There is no doubt that the current system is not leading to equal outcomes for students. Additionally, the bureaucracy that schools deal with in order to make meaningful changes can appear to be limiting. That bureaucracy is often the first thing to go with charter schools. Charter schools get their name because they operate under the conditions of legally binding contract called a charter. A school's charter is issued to an operator by a governing body or authorizer. Now, this is where things can get complicated because depending on the state, there's little regulation over who can start a charter, and the oversight of that charter can be dictated by any nonprofit organization that operator so chooses. This often leads to charter schools that don't make good on their stated charter or commit all-out fraud with taxpayer money, stealing not only from the taxpayer, but the students who they're supposed to be educating. Which, if you ask me, shouldn't be all that surprising, given the fact that when schools are privatized, the interest goes from the student to profits. Like many other capitalist endeavors, money can drive people to places they may not go if there was more clarity on what they should be doing. That is exactly why public schools exist within districts that can directly state how they want money to be used on the basis of the group conscience of that community that votes those school board members into positions of power. Overall, there is much more clarity and accountability for the school when they are fully public. There is also no clear data that charter schools increase student outcomes. Overall, charter schools are a capitalist solution to a larger societal problem. The individualistic nature of American society that believes that schools are failing for lack of choice rather than a larger systemic understanding that we undervalue equity in education. Nowhere in the Constitution is there a right to an education. I feel like this might be a good place to start in American society. Our federal laws reflect our values as a society and set the country's standard, and will additionally allocate federal tax dollars to education. If we want our money to go directly to students, that the courts need to shift the onus from the states individually and provide a more robust spending in areas that have to do with that more robust spending in areas that do not have high property taxes. Unlike the policies in No Child Left Behind that punish schools for bad test scores and took away federal spending based on those test scores, we could provide those schools with more support in order to train the teachers and figure out the problem rather than punishing the problem. I would also advocate that school choice debate should be renamed the for-profit education versus public education debate. And the profits I'm talking about, and that we've been talking about in this talk today, are not the kind of profits that are reinvested in the community or the students. Thank you so much.